Alright guys, it is episode 9. Not much has changed here visually speaking. It's more or less probably very similar to the last episode. I am going to be conscious of keeping this camera as still as possible because I know the couple of my videos, it's been shaking all over and I know it's hard to watch. So if I start to shake this camera a lot in this video, just yell at me through the screen and I'll stop. I added the image stabilization feature in camera, so it should help a little bit. I could already tell it's helping. But we're not here to talk about image stabilization. We're here to talk about this setup. And although not a lot has changed besides me kind of adding my telly there, a lot has changed behind this setup, and I started to finally connect the signal wires from the rack to the board and from the board to the tape machine over there, as well as the rack here. And I want to show you in real time how relatively easy it is to move all this equipment so you can get behind it. So I'm going to put this on the tripod here. And I know you guys are rejoicing that I'm using a tripod. I apologize. So, unfortunately, it's kind of hard to zoom out, but alright, that's probably good enough. You can see what's going on. Alright. So, and since I don't have any acoustic treatment yet, the audio is probably not that great that you're hearing. There's a lot of reverberation, but it's the best we can do until that happens. So, okay, so I set up a microphone. Hopefully the audio is a little bit better. This is an audio channel after all. But once again, I forget what part I'm cutting out here, but I'm mostly going to be centered around channel 1 through 16 here. And I kind of strategically set up everything in this room so far so that when I'm sitting here normally, I could kind of reach everything, as opposed to as if I was sitting, say, over on this side. But I'm going to be doing most of my mixing, channel 1 through 16 and then maybe 17 through 24 if I set up that functionality for my Alesis HG24. But anyway, the point is, I'm going to be centered around here. When it comes time to do my mix downs and tracking, I can move this, and I'm taking it slow just to make sure I'm not pulling on any wires. That's about right here. As you can see, there's a little bit stress on the wires. There you go. If I set it up right there, once again, if I'm centered track 1 through 16, I could see all of my compressors very easily. I could see my Alesis HG24 very easily. Let me get the camera so I could show you what it looks like. Alright, so hopefully you can kind of see what I'm working with here. It's hard because of the focal length of the lens. I can't really get a wide angle view, but you can see I'm going to be sitting right here where the stool is. So I got channel 1 through 16 through here. I got the rack right there. Most of the units I'm going to be using regularly are right here. Patch bay here, and then the units I don't really touch as much or use as much are down here, so I don't have to bend down as much. But this is really starting to come together, really starting to like it. Now, as I said, I want to show you how easy it is to move everything, so let's show you that. Before we move everything, I just want to show you what this setup looks like when I'm going to be in my mixing and tracking mode. You can see the wires here. None of it's dragging on the floor. I strategically made it so it's lifted off the ground. All of the wire looms are hard connected to this piece of wood here that I explained in the past. So there's really very, very little stress on these wires. It's obviously not ideal to have hanging wires like this, but the way I did it, I strategically did it, not to put a lot of stress on anything. So it's really working out well. And this kind of distance I have shown right now is the max distance I could actually move this rack. I wish it could move out a little more. But because of the wire looms, or the snakes rather, that I had already on hand, this is the maximum length I could get away with. Some of these snakes are a little shorter than I would like, but this is more than enough. As you can see, it's kind of hard for me because the camera's in the way. I could easily get behind the rack here and work on anything or change anything or remove wires so I could take a unit out. I actually already had to take a unit out to do some repair, and I did it off camera because you got to realize all this camera work and narration, it is a lot of work, and this whole setup is taking me twice as long as it would have if I wasn't recording it. So I hope you guys are appreciating, you know, all the work that I'm showing here. But I had to take out, just move over here. As you can see, I'm using a tripod. You're welcome, you're welcome. Had to take out the DBX 160X because I kept having a reoccurring problem in my old setup where the LED meters on the DBX 160X, it would always have problems, and I would have to tap it a lot to get it to work correctly. So anyway, to make a long story short, I had to remove this, and it was so easy. I mean, 2 screws, 2 wires, input and output on the back, and the power wire. It took me a total of 2 minutes to take out this unit. I mean, I know I keep stressing over and over in these videos how I'm optimizing everything for if I have to do repairs or take units out or swap stuff around, but the fruit of my labors was immediately clear when I had to take this out. Keep in mind, in my old setup, because this unit was just sitting on top of my board and I had about 5 other units on top of it, I couldn't get to it for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years that I've had it. So I had to deal with that issue with the LED meters all the time. I had to constantly hit it to get it to work, and you know, being able to fix this stuff and fix the minor issues so easily is just, I'm just emphasizing it over and over and over, because if you're gonna get something out of these videos, I really hope it's, you know, the amount of time you could be saving, and really the mysticism and the part that kind of scares people away from analog. If you do it correctly, it's really not that big of a deal. And for example, the repair I did for this, all I had to do was I removed the, it's a piece of PCB board that controls his LED meters. I removed it from my board, sprayed a little bit of contact cleaner on the contacts that connected that PC board to the main PC board of the unit, plugged it back in, and that was it. That was it. All I literally had to do was just spray a little contact cleaner on the contacts, and it fixed the issue. So if you're a fan of the channel, you know I harp on over and over and over again, 99% of the issues you're going to have in an analog studio can just be solved with a simple can of contact cleaner. I have it right here. And I've said 1,000 times before, this is literally the same can I've had since high school. So it's about 10, 15 years old, somewhere around there. And it's still probably about filled about 1/8 of the way. I mean, I bought this for 10 bucks or something like that. I mean, this stuff is a lifesaver. But you guys have heard me say that ad nauseum before, so we're not going to spend too much time on that. So let's go back to here. So this is probably a much better view of how much room I have. I mean, literally, I can move back and forth. I can get to stuff very easily. Awesome. As I said in the previous video, I was going to keep track of the heat coming out of my Alesis HG24 with that new fan I have, because the fan, the airflow that it produces is probably 1/4 of the old fan. And I had this unit running for maybe 2 hours, 3 hours continuously last night. I was doing some testing, and the temperature coming out of the unit was the same from when I started to 2 hours to 3 hours in, and I was just feeling it with my hand. You know, I didn't use a thermometer or anything, but to my hand, it was still, you know, room temperature air coming out of there. I touched the unit. It was a little warm to the touch, but, you know, nothing too bad. I know these units have a built-in error code if it gets too hot, so, you know, as always, I'll keep an eye on it. I don't think it's going to be an issue. Funnily enough, this fan, the new fan in there, is so quiet. The hard drive that the media is stored on for this unit, that spinning is actually louder than this fan. So in hindsight, maybe if I bought a little bit stronger of a fan that was slightly louder, it might have been a better choice than the one I bought. But I mean, I spent less than $20 for that fan. So if I wind up swapping it out in the future, not a super big deal. At one time, I was thinking about either cable tying these or somehow wrapping all these wires so they acted as one unit, but it really turned out to not be necessary. The way I kind of organized everything here so that it was all more or less in line with one another to its respective place. So like, in other words, I purposely attached each snake in a specific location to kind of minimize crossing of wires. And once you see the back of the mixing desk here, you'll see what I mean. I kind of organized everything to be as streamlined as possible. So adding something to here is really not going to add much more than me just feeling better about myself. You can see the only thing I have really on the ground is this power wire. And I'm actually thinking about changing that just because of the reason that when I roll this thing back and forth, sometimes the power wire gets caught on the caster, and I have to go back and kind of move it away from the caster. And it's just a little bit of a nuisance. Not a big deal, but a little bit of a nuisance. Let's move everything out like I originally said, and I want to show you that process. All right, so let's do this. Let's move this stool out of the way. You know, right now I just have my TAC 88-8 just on the floor here on this towel. It's easy to slide, but I might also wind up putting this on casters. I'm not sure yet. I don't even know if I'm going to wind up using this machine. I don't know. We'll worry about that later, but let's start inching everything forward. Start with the remote. Let's move the tape machine a little forward. Oops. Hold on, I gotta move the mixing desk. It's pinched. There you go. There you go. Move the tape machine really easily. As I said in the previous video, the amount of weight on this mixing desk, actually, that moved actually pretty easily. Ever since I vacuumed and I vacuumed up all the sawdust from me drilling holes, this thing is rolling a lot easier now. Wow, awesome. Awesome, that moved great. Let's move this again. So this is pretty much like the maximum I could pull it out, maybe a little more. Now I'm just kind of showing off here. Now, let's go back here. I'm going to show you what we're working with. Alright, so here we go. Once again, it's kind of hard for me to show you on camera. One, because the wide angle is not really wide enough for me to kind of show everything properly. But two, it's actually pretty deceiving. I'm looking at the screen on my camera right now, and this actually looks way narrower than it actually is. Let me walk there and show you how much room there actually is for me to get back there. I mean, I have so much room. If I have to work on things, I mean, look at how easy it is to get everything. So if I'm having a problem with a wire, maybe I got to spray a little contact cleaner in one of the contacts. Maybe I want to switch stuff around. I mean, look at this. I know it's like maybe not the most exciting thing to be talking about, and I've been spending a lot of time talking about the organization, but for me, in real life, for my workflow, I am so happy with this, and this is why I keep talking about it so much. You know, I've shown clips of what my wires looked like in my previous setup, so this is like such a game changer, and I have about 90% of the work done. I have two big snakes that I have yet to connect, and that is going to be the insert snakes for channel 1 through 16. The reason I didn't do that yet is, one, I'm waiting for one in the mail, but more importantly, I wanted to do some testing of everything so far before I put that in. And that's for two reasons. One, those wire looms are really bulky, and especially in the rack, you know, I'm going to have, what's the number there? 32 jacks in that rack just with those two snakes. So that being removed, that'll be my last step of adding those inserts in there. And I also ran out of wire looms. Let me bring the camera here so I can kind of show you everything I'm talking about. Okay, so now we're in the back of my mixing desk, and it's kind of a shame that it's really hard to tell on camera how organized this is. Right now, like I'm looking at the screen on my camera, this looks like a mess. I know it looks like a mess, but I'm telling you, in real life, when you're here in person and you can see the three-dimensional, you know, aspect of all this stuff, it's really way neater than it may look on camera. And you could see I made ample use of these, what do you call, I don't know, hoop connectors, cable connectors. I use them exclusively here. And, you know, we talked a little bit in the past. I got a lot of comments about different ways to organize wires. And honestly, these things, I prefer this. After I started doing all this and organizing everything, this is my preferred method. And you can see I kind of have two different scenarios. One, just like my rack, I have ones that are taut. You can see this wire loom here that I made. I have it wrapped in napkin again, and I have the plastic connector hoop connected to the back of my board. Right now, this is tight. This is taut. Whereas in other situations, I have it loose. You can see here, these are just loose in there. This is merely just to keep it organized and off the floor. Whereas this is strategic. Once again, I know I repeat myself a lot, but in order for me not to put stress on these connectors, both for the sake of the connector here as well as the jack in the back of my board. So because I have, like, let's take this one for example, this wire loom here. I have it tight here. You can see it loose here, loose here. You can see me shaking it. I have it loose here. I'm sorry, because I was working with all snakes that I had on hand, you know, the lengths of said snakes are not ideal for my specific setup. So you can see some I just have looped here to kind of take up some of the slack. You see this one here, my hand, was really long, so I had to loop it a few times just to take up a lot of the slack. And that was because I wanted all of the wires from this corner of my mixing desk to my rack to be the same length. You can see, as I was showing you before, you know, all these from this point to this point are the same length. But what I wanted to show you, before I get sidetracked, this wire loom here, you can see it's loose here as well. So when I'm moving this rack back and forth, the two tight points, one on the back of my rack here, that part is tight, and then going back to here, this part is tight. I can move this wire freely, and I know that no matter what I do, I'm never going to be pulling on this wire loom and messing with these connectors in the back here. And I already did some testing last night when I was testing all these connections. And I mean, if you worked with stuff before, you know, these 1/4-inch connectors, you kind of have to mess with them sometimes. And a couple of them, I had to kind of jiggle to get the connection to work and to get a strong signal. So that's why it's really important for me to set it up where the endpoints are tight, because I don't want these to be jiggling around. That's how you start getting loose connections. Now, obviously in an ideal world, I wouldn't have these 1/4-inch connectors. XLR connectors are way better at that sort of thing. You don't have to mess with them nearly as much as a 1/4-inch connector. RCA connectors are actually a little better, just because on RCA connectors you could bend this outer ring. You can see how the outer ring is split right there. So it allows you to bend these in a little bit if they get loose, and they have a much tighter connection compared to 1/4-inch plugs. The only way to make these tighter are by going into your machine and bending the metal spring in there that makes the connection. So it's not ideal, but listen, this is what I have to work with, so it is what it is. This mixing board, the Tascam, this is the M3500. You can see these plates here. They sell, or sold, a upgrade kit that basically would allow you to get balanced connections, and they would come out with the, what are they called? The D28 connectors? I forget what it's called. I'll put the name on the screen here. You know, the connectors here, so you could plug in directly to there. That's obviously much neater than having to use these jacks on the back. Also would be the benefit of having balanced connections. Unfortunately for me, those balance kits are extremely hard to come by in the year 2026. You know, they stopped making those probably 30 years ago, so they're not at all easy to come by. So it is what it is. I only have the ability for unbalanced connections with my setup. Not ideal, but listen, this is home recording in garage, so it is what it is. What else can we show you here? Like I said, this is about 90% the way done. I ran out of these loop connectors, so a lot of the wires here are going to be a little neater in the final run. You can see this one here is the group outs here. It's just loose right now. I'm going to eventually wind up attaching it to this beam right here. Going to be a little neater. You can see, let me push this forward a little bit. I'm going to eventually, once I buy more of those loop connectors, I'm going to wind up attaching a few of them to the top, or I guess the bottom, of the desk here. So I could kind of hang a lot of these wires, make it much neater here so there's not wires hanging everywhere. And this way when I pull it back and forth on the floor, you know, no wires are going to be dragging on the floor. One, it helps me keep it clean in here because I could vacuum in here, because it's, you know, keeping the dust down in a tape studio is very beneficial. So the more I could keep this area clean, both from an organizational standpoint as well as a, physically cleaning and dusting and vacuuming, the better. So if all these wires are off the floor and I could come in with a vacuum real quick, periodically, that is going to be great. Let's look at the back of my tape machine here. And I wish it was a little easier to tell on camera what's going on here, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but I have 8 channels going into the inputs, and you can see I bought these blue connectors here. These are splitters, so I have 1 input going into 2 inputs on my machine. So for my group 1 out, here, I have a wire going, and that is going to be split between track 1 and track 9. It's going to be split for my group 2, track 2 and track 10, track 3 and track 11, etc., etc., etc. So all of my 8 group outs are going to be split into 2 signal paths, inputs onto my machine. Hopefully I'm making sense there. You understand what I'm saying. I'll get more into how I set up everything in a future video, because that's going to be an hour-long video in its own, me explaining how I connected everything and why I didn't do it a certain way, why other things you could do, other things I might try in the future, because as I stated in the very beginning of the series, it is an extremely creative process, and it's going to depend on how you want your personal workflow to be set up. And it's going to be a very, personal thing to you. The way I set up this board is very different than the way the manual for this board suggests you set it up, and I think that's why a lot of people get confused. I get a lot of emails from people asking me, how do I set up my board? How do I set up my board? And I say, read the manual, and they say, I'm still confused. The way the manual for these mixing boards kind of explain, and tape machines as well, explain you to hook up everything, to me is just not very useful in a modern home recording setup. It's more useful for, a professional studio where there's going to be a lot of live room tracking, whereas mine's more set up for mostly overdub sessions, but smaller live room sessions where it's just me and 2 other friends at most, right? And most of the time it's just me and my friend Alex. It's just the 2 of us in here if I'm doing a live room setup. So it's much different than if you were recording, say, an ensemble of 8 musicians. So that's why I kind of have it set up a certain way. Really not much else going on. You see, I make ample use of zip ties in a lot of places. Zip ties are great. I obviously only put that in areas where I know I'm not going to be removing wires very frequently. I'm going to draw attention to something kind of random here. In the corner of this room, you can see here a little bit of water damage. And previously, in the past couple weeks, we had a lot of snow in pretty much the whole United States, and this was actually a previous leak that I thought had since been fixed, but because of the snow on the roof, it created what they call an ice dam, and it caused a little bit of water to run from the top of my roof all the way down my house, and this is the second floor of the house, so it also went down into my garage, which is directly below this floor here. And the reason I'm mentioning it is just I have to keep an eye on this. When it gets warmer out, I'm gonna have to go up on a ladder on the, to get to my roof and to put some silicone and to put some tar to kind of waterproof where the water was coming in as much as possible, because while the water is not going to drip onto my tape machine, what can happen if there's a lot of moisture in your wall, it can cause humidity issues if you have a unit right next to this. I discovered this years ago. On my drum set, I had another leak in this house, and I didn't realize it for months it was happening, and it was behind my wall, so I didn't immediately know there was a leak. But I looked at my drum set one day, and the floor tom, you can see here, that was close to the wall, started to get surface rust on the chrome. And I said, what the hell? Why does only this side of my drum have surface rust? And it was because the humidity in the wall was actually causing, rust issues. So it is paramount that I fix this issue as soon as it is warm out and I could get out there with a ladder, because over a long time it could cause issues with the electronics inside this tape machine. It could cause rusting, and I obviously do not want that at all. So I'm gonna have to in the future fix that and to make sure there's no more leaking there. What else is there to talk about back here? Not really much else. As I've said in the past, I love wood because you could just modify wood so easily. You can see I drilled dozens and dozens of holes all over here. Sometimes I would drill a hole and go, that's not a good spot, and I'll move it a little bit, and it's not a big deal because it's just wood. You could just keep drilling holes very easily, and it's not a problem at all. I'm a huge wood fan, so I'm going to show you here. I started the run out of properly sized connectors. I have a small connector here that is screwed into the side of this wood, and I have a zip tie wrapped around the snake and then wrapped around this connector. And this is a hard connection. You can see I'm pulling it and it's not sliding back and forth. And you can see this is the tape ins for channels 1 through 8. So this is coming from my tape machine into my board. And once again, a hard connection there. So if I move the tape machine or the desk and I pull on this wire, it's not putting any stress on the connectors there. So really great. You can see a lot of these, like this, these wires here, I probably had about 20 extra feet here. So I just made a simple loop here, put a couple of those Velcro ties, and called it a day. Just have it hanging here. Not ideal for organizational purposes, but you know, I'm not going to buy a bunch of new wires for this setup. I'm just going to use what I have because I don't have the money to be throwing around like that. And that's really it for back here. Maybe we could look at a little bit of the connections coming out of my preamp section. So I started to make my own wire looms. You can see I have my 4 microphone ins to my N67. I have the 2 microphone ins that I'm using for the Altec. I have the microphone in for this tube preamp, and I have this microphone into the Bogan. I put them all within this wire loom here. You can see I have the 6 here, goes down here. The other 2, the MP566 tube preamp and the Bogan amp, wind up going inside the loom at this point here. It's kind of hard to see. And I have all of those microphone ins running in one of these wire loops. You see I used this hard plastic casing as well as some zip ties to keep it neat. This is going to go to the XLR patch bay on the front of this rack. And I'm just showing you this just to show you how I organized everything. And once again, on camera, I know a lot of this probably seems like a gigantic mess, but in person it's really not. And a lot of it looks messy just because the wires are longer than they need to be. For example, you can see another one here I have just looped up to kind of take away some of the slack here. If all this stuff wasn't here, it would look a lot cleaner, but I don't really care what it looks like. I just need to be able to fix this stuff and remove stuff easily, as I keep saying. So the way I have it set up, it's very easy to do. So let's get out of the back of here. I'm all cramped up. Let's get out of there. Try not to shake the camera. Trying not to shake the camera. Give me a break. So let's push everything back now. Okay, so just as easily as I pulled it out, let's push it back in now. And I'm just going to go slowly by slowly. Probably don't need to, but just for the sake of not pulling on anything that I shouldn't be. Here we go. There we go. There we go. Hopefully this is somewhat interesting to look at. I mean, that's pretty much it. Push that in, push this in. I mean, look at that, guys. I mean, what did that take, 30 seconds? This is awesome. This is fucking awesome. This is a professional setup, in my opinion. The only thing unprofessional about this setup is the acoustics in this room. So, you know, I'm going to do my best to treat everything in here. Even just talking now, the amount of reverberation, it's tiring to the ears. This room, there's a lot of flat surfaces right now. You know, I thought I was going to get away with maybe $200 worth of acoustic, what's the insulation, for the lack of a better word, I can't think of right now. But I honestly think I'm going to have to spend more because there's a lot of flat surfaces, and you know, all this work is going to be nil if the acoustics in here aren't up to par. I mean, obviously, this setup, all this that I'm doing is a huge upgrade from downstairs, and I didn't buy any new equipment besides you know, a voltage regulator, but just the workflow, the organization, everything is going to be such a more professional setup, and I think that's going to benefit my recordings in ways that you wouldn't think. So all this work, as I said, you know, if I don't do some acoustic treatment in here, it's going to be all for nothing, and I'm already telling you right now, the acoustic treatment I'm doing in here is not going to be, you know, super professional. It's not going to be great. I just realized you can't see my head. Let me move the camera. You want to see my beauty head. You know, it's not going to be a perfect professional setup, but it's at least going to bring down the reverberation. Because I'll just do a little clap test right now. I mean, I'm sure you could hear it just in my voice, but there's a lot of reverb. Hopefully you can kind of hear with those claps. I have the gain on this microphone cranked to the max, so I'm sure you could hear that. A lot of the reverb comes from my drum set itself, just from this sympathetic resonation of the toms and my snare drum. But you know, when I'm doing recording of vocals, I didn't do it in the past because I was in a bigger live room downstairs. But if I'm going to be doing vocals in here, I'm probably going to want to put towels on these drums to muffle them as much as possible. But, you know, we'll deal with that when we get there. I started to think about how I'm going to start to record vocals in here because, you know, vocals are one of those things that you record that it's really dependent on the acoustics in the room. You know, anything that's not an electric amplified instrument, you know, is going to depend a lot on the room. Like a drum set relies heavily on the room sound, vocals, acoustic guitar. So anyway, I've been starting to think about this stuff, where in the room I'm going to record it. And I'm thinking, this is what I'm thinking so far. If I'm going to use a ribbon microphone, which right now the best microphones I have are ribbon microphones, or a ribbon microphone. I have a new ribbon microphone, as I might have talked about in a previous video, I forget. But, you know, that's a figure 8 pickup pattern. And right now, where I'm standing in the room, once again, I know it's kind of hard to see, but hopefully you could kind of understand the layout of the room through all these videos. If I have a ribbon microphone right here, and the front of it's obviously facing me, my voice, and the back of it is facing where the drum set is, that corner there, I'm going to put a lot of thick acoustic treatment there. So hopefully that will minimize any reflections. So anything being picked up by the back of the microphone should be minimized. Another benefit of this, imagine, once again, ribbon microphone here, the nulls of the figure 8 pickup pattern are going to be this way. And if I do it correctly, I should be able to point the null of the figure 8 pickup pattern towards my tape machine. And as I mentioned in the past, I want to minimize the amount of physical noise coming from the tape machine. You know, the tape physically being played across the head, because it's louder than you think. And in this room, it's going to affect my recording. So if I'm strategic like that, I should be able to put the null of the microphone there, and it should minimize it. You know, obviously, since this room is so small, the noise from the tape machine is going to be bouncing from all these walls, but we'll see how much of an issue that is once I start doing some recording. There's not as much of a need for shelves as I originally thought. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 shelves that I thought I was going to be using in this room, but one, there's really not a good spot for these shelves, because all the spots that are open so far, I'm going to be putting acoustic treatment. So obviously I can't put a shelf on acoustic treatment, so I don't know. We'll kind of see. We'll see as I start to put everything together. The very few things I have left to do in here before it's like, you know, ready for me to do some like proper recordings is acoustic treatment, as I mentioned, and 2, really just put up the artwork I have, which obviously is not going to affect my recordings in any way, but I have a bunch of pictures and different things that I like that I want to be in this room, and I'm going to do that after I put up the acoustic treatment, because I'm going to kind of fit in pictures around that stuff, because the acoustic treatment placement is obviously going to be more important than, you know, pictures on the wall. But that's about it, guys. I'm trying to think of anything else. I started finally to do some of the testing and troubleshooting of all of the signal paths, because I finally, set up the signal wires in the back, as I was just showing you. And I was doing that last night. I was actually planning on doing it on video, but I thought I was going to run into a lot of issues, and I was like, no one's going to want to watch a 3-hour video of me troubleshooting and going through a lot, but it actually went really smoothly. I tested 95% of everything here, all of the aux sends and the EQs and all the signal paths and the inserts so far, and I ran into very little issues. Only a couple wires on my patch bay were, backwards, like I had the input where the output was and the output where the input was, minor stuff like that. I had to mess with a couple jacks on the back of this machine just to get a signal, but it was really easy, and that's obviously a good sign. Something really important is, you guys know, on my old board, for years I was dealing with a capacitor or something failing on the unit, and I spent so many hours trying to track it down, and it would prevent me from recording sometimes because it would kind of come and go, it would be worse, and sometimes than the other. Over the 3 or so hours last night that I had this board on, I heard no popping, which obviously makes sense. This is a different board, but obviously a great sign that there's no popping and it's not an issue. Either the board itself is in better condition than my other board, which, as I stated in the past, I swapped out a lot of stuff on my old board and that didn't fix the issue. So either something I just didn't swap out on my old board is just better condition on this board, or, which I don't think this is the case, but it is possible that the voltage regulator and the voltage filter, the line filter I bought, was, fixing whatever issue I was having. Maybe it was just dirty power. I really don't think so, but of course it is a possibility, so I should mention it. Something I do want to mention in regards to the troubleshooting that was making me tear my hair out last night was, let me show you something. Let me turn the unit on. Alright, so we're sending power to my board, and it's probably going to be hard to see on camera. Let me zoom in here on the main VU meters. On my board, if I could back out for a second, on my board there is a tone oscillator here. So if I turn it on, I have 40 hertz, 100 hertz, 1K, 10K, 16K, and obviously that's useful for when I'm doing calibration onto my tape machine, or even onto my Alesis HG24 if I want to test signal paths, which I was using this last night. I was using a 1K hertz signal to kind of test all of my signal flow paths. And let me show you something. If I do that, if I turn that on, okay, so we're zoomed in on the VU meters here. Now let me turn the oscillator on. First we're going to do 40 hertz. Now let's center this on 0 VU. You can see that the left channel is probably about a half a dB less than the right channel. Let's go to 100 hertz. Same thing. You can see this one's now, the left is directly on 0 VU, and the one on the right is about a half dB higher. Same thing for 1K. Let's move this down for 10K. 10K is pretty close. No, actually, same thing. The left channel is about a half dB lower. And then 16K, same thing. Maybe even a little more, actually. It's almost a full dB lower. So I thought for hours, maybe about an hour, that on my board, the VU meters, or just the left and right main bus, were not calibrated correctly, and they were off, by a dB or a half a dB. And even in the manual for the Tascam M3500, it says that the VU meters and the main mix bus might be, a half a dB off. And it says not to worry. There's not really a good way to calibrate this machine. There is a way, but it's not easy to do. It's hard to get to. And to make a long story short, I got, oh my God, my old board wasn't like this. At least I don't think it was. And I was tearing my hair out. It was only until about an hour in I said, hold on, let me turn off this oscillator and let me just connect a mono signal source to the board and check out my meters. So I wound up connecting my phone. I downloaded a signal frequency generator. So I just put like 100 hertz, or I'm sorry, 100 hertz from my phone going to a mono signal to one of my channels, and I was just monitoring that mono signal on my main mix bus. And lo and behold, when I did that, I don't have it set up right now, but the left and right channel were completely in line with one another. So it's not actually the left and right main bus that are off. It's actually just that tone oscillator, for whatever reason, is just slightly different from the left channel to the right channel. Not a big deal. You know, when I go to do any calibrations with that tone generator, one, you know, a half a dB in the tape analog realm, you know, that's nothing. Once you start playing music, that's going to be, you know, it's not going to matter. It's really not going to matter. But two, the group outs, that tone oscillator, when you turn it on, it goes to the 8 outs. It's going to be a mono signal anyway to my individual channels. So if it's off a little bit, no big deal. I already, in my previous video, I did, you know, how to calibrate a tape machine. I kind of go over this a little more, but, you know, the difference between a half a dB on these faders is so minor. You know, it's really not a good idea to go crazy trying to get everything super exactly on a 0 dB kind of calibration in the analog realm, because things drift. It doesn't really matter in the big realm of things. Once you have a stereo signal, and it's not going to matter. And I wish I would have known this earlier when I started recording. As I discussed in previous videos, the reason I liked mono mixes so much was not necessarily at first because of how it sounded, but because I was forced to, because I was having minor inconsistencies with my left and right channels with various pieces of equipment, most notably my mixdown machine over here. The left and right channel on this machine when I first got it were nowhere near each other with frequency response, and because of that I was like, fuck it, I'll just do mono mixes. And it wasn't until relatively recently that I realized, you know, going crazy in the analog world for left and right channel congruency is just, it's a rabbit hole that sometimes is not worth it. And when you're off a half a dB, in the real world, that doesn't mean anything. In the digital world, people go crazy trying to fix that stuff, but, you know, I guarantee you, if you were to look back into music that was made in the 60s, there was probably a lot of incongruency between the left and right channels, and in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Once it was on a vinyl record, and it was a stereo signal, all that kind of, the uglies would get kind of lost, so to speak, and, you know, all that could be fixed in the mastering stage, etc., etc. That statement's probably going to upset a few people, but deal with it. So this top CL52E here, I'm using this as the master bus compressor, and right now it's not connected. Let me connect it real quick. I'll do it on camera so you can see what I'm doing. So the blue, red, green, and yellow wires here go to my CL52E. So let's connect those in. And I'm connecting those to the stereo insert on my control board. So now the main mix bus for my mixing board is being routed through this. So right now, let me turn on the signal generator again. And then we'll look at this. Alright, so we got 1K being sent through here. And this is not an ideal unit to be using as a master bus compressor, and I'm trying to show you right now. There you go, you can kind of see. Right now, 3 LED lights are lit up here and only 2 are lit up here. And this is the reason this unit is not ideal is because you have separate input and output controls for the left and right channel. So you can see the input is the one on the left here, the output's the one on the right here, and once again, there's 2 channels here. I'm using it as a left and right channel. This is not ideal. For a stereo mix bus compressor, ideally you just have one input knob and one output knob, and it controls both channels, left and right channel. And once again, I've been through so many rabbit holes of trying to make these completely congruent with one another, and I actually spent about another hour last night just messing with this compressor to try to make sure that whatever signal I was getting from my board was being sent to this, and it was basically making sure the left and right channels were as equal as possible. And you could see, even right now, despite me spending over an hour last night trying to make them congruent, you can see there's a slight inconsistency there. Now, is that inconsistency within the LED meters on this machine? Is it due to because this machine hasn't warmed up yet? Is it due to because the signal itself is just not congruent? I don't know. There's a million variables here. And once again, once you start mixing an actual song, this little difference is not going to matter. I'll show you. If I increase the volume here, you know, it's hard for me to show both this unit and the main mix bus fader I'm moving right now, but I'm only moving it a very little bit in order to get them to go. You know, I'm talking about minute differences. If I could show you. Obviously, this is not an ideal setup. I would have two cameras or something, but I'm moving it, let's see. I mean, this much. You can't even see it on camera how much I'm moving it. I mean, I'm basically just like vibrating it with my finger, and just that amount of me moving that just barely is enough to make this third LED go on and off, on and off. So you can't get too caught up in the analog realm about, the lack of a better word, I'm using congruency between the left and right channels. That's what I mean. And really I should have that clicked in to make sure the left and right channel are compressing at the same amount. And there was something else I wanted to mention. What was it? It's actually funny. Between the last take and this take, I wound up doing even more testing on the left and right channels because it just seems to keep changing a little bit. But anyway, right now I have a mono signal source coming from my phone to the fader, and I have that going to the main mix bus, the left and right channel evenly. Okay, and I'm going to raise the volume slowly on my main fader. And what I want to show you is, one, let's go to 0 VU. Let's see if it's still congruent, because every time I seem to test it, it seems to be off. See, it's off again. About a minute ago, it was pretty close, but you can see there's some drift in the left and right channel, and I don't know if it's between the actual mix bus or if it has to do with the meters. If I had to guess, it's actually the meters that are a little off rather than the main mix bus. But once again, I mean, we're talking about 1/4 dB here. Not that big of a deal. I'm not going to go crazy about it. It's not going to matter one iota. But the thing I actually wanted to show you, I keep getting sidetracked, and excuse the dirty screen, I'm going to clean that after this, but wow, this is like now the 20th take I'm trying to show you this, and you can see it's only like a minute later, and I'm already getting a different signal difference pretty drastically. Now it's 1 dB, and once again, I don't know if it's the VU meters. I don't know if it has to do with the meter select buttons here. You know, I just cleaned these with a little bit of contact cleaner. Same thing with this control board section. I don't know if it's because these connections aren't quite great. Let me just kind of clean them as much as I can right now. Let's go back to this. So once again, I should be looking at a mono source right now, but you can tell it's about 1 dB off. Now let's go back to channel 1 here for a second. Got channel 1 right here. See if the problem lies within channel 1. Let me just clean this a little bit. Now, ideally, in a perfect world, I would have sprayed contact cleaner in all of the pots and buttons here, but they're sealed and they're hard to get to, so I haven't done that. But let's kind of clean this out a little bit. Let's move this a little bit around. And when I was doing my testing last night, all of the pots were very scratchy. You know, this board probably hasn't been used in more than a decade, so that's to be expected. You know, these are sealed potentiometers once again, so I couldn't spray stuff in it easily. And I would have to take everything out anyway, and it's just a little bit of a hassle. So let's move that around. Let's center it. All right, and once again, it's like I was doing a lot of this stuff last night. I don't know how interesting it is on camera, but you could kind of see the turmoil I've been going to. All right, so let's go back to the meters now. Let's see if that helped any. Okay, so let's try this again. Let's see if that helped any. And nope, still dB off, a whole dB off. Oh man, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about where you just want to tear out your hair. Let's go back. Let's turn off channel 1. Let's turn on the signal generator again. Let's see where that's at. Now the signal generator is pretty close. It's closer than it was. So as you can see, there's a lot of drift here, and you know, this is once again what kind of makes a setup like this not professional. I mean, obviously Tascam is about as cheap as you could get for prosumer gear, and we're looking at at least a 30-year-old board. I'm sure the capacitors need to be swapped out and stuff like that. That's why I try not to go crazy, and why personally the music I make is more garage than anything, because these minor inconsistencies here and there, it's never going to be 100% correct. In the grand scheme of things, I mean, that difference there, that's so minor, and all of the little nitty-gritty differences, whenever I go to do a mix down, that minor difference in audio level, I could pick up the slack here on my tape machine because the inputs for that mixdown machine, the left and right channels, are separate. I could also pick up the slack with my main bus compressor. There's ways to compensate for these minor inconsistencies, and for all I know, it's just the VU meters that are slightly off. Especially when you're looking at VU meters with a sine wave, they tend to act a little funky sometimes, and you got a lot of actual physics problems there that, when you're testing sine waves, they don't act as a regular audio source is. For example, last night when I was doing my testing, I was using all these sine wave generators, whether through my board, the built-in tone oscillator, and through my phone, and, it was playing out of these speakers here, and just because of the geometry of my room, the nulls and voids and the cancellations of these square walls was very obvious. I mean, you move your head a little bit, and you could immediately tell a huge drop-off in volume. That's just the nature of being in a rectangular room. That's always going to happen. But the point I'm making is, those sort of things are a lot more pronounced when you're looking at a steady-state sine wave versus, an audio, musical source where, the signal wave is, it's not a simple sine wave. It's all over the place with a million fucking modulations and shit. So try not to go too crazy. This is garage. I'm a home recordist. I'm dealing with a $500 board that's 30 years old and probably needs, a full recapping. And, to do a full recapping on this board would probably take me about 3 months. I mean, between the other things I have in life to worry about and doing a full recap, I mean, ain't nobody got time for that right now. And this is good as it's going to get. And hopefully you guys kind of get where I'm coming from with the Mario good enough approach, quote unquote. So out of curiosity, I sent a mono signal source from channel 2 to the main mix bus. And let me show you the result I'm getting with that. If I zoom in here, you can see channel 2 is more or less exactly the same. You can see the left channel is maybe a contour higher than the right channel, but the point is, the difference I was seeing in the past couple shots you probably watched from channel 1, channel 1, the signal being sent to the main mix bus is slightly off, and now channel 2 is correct. Once again, this is probably a little boring to watch, but this is the type of testing I was doing last night, and just trying to see where I could optimize this setup as much as possible, where the errors are, where the inconsistencies are, what adjustments I can make, what needs attention. And it becomes really tedious, and whenever, I think part of the problem is people, when they talk about, getting an analog setup, this type of stuff really can stress them out. And it used to stress me out a lot. I mean, it still does a little bit. But as I've said probably 10 times already in this video, you can't get caught up with the extreme minor differences like that. Now, a whole dB, that's pretty significant. In a professional recording studio, a whole dB would be unacceptable. But in a home recording setup where I'm just making garage rock music, man, you know, it's not going to matter. I'm happy with it. As I've stated so many times in my videos, you know, I used to do mix downs. Forget my mix down machine, my 16 track over here. Before I knew what I was doing and I was trying to do calibrations without doing it the proper way, you know, the state of my equipment was far from ideal. But the music I made, I mean, my board, with all the inconsistencies that it had, you know, I made this whole album off of it. And yeah, it's garage, you know, it's by no means a polished record, but that's the kind of music I like anyway. So it wound up working out perfectly, and I don't know. I think that's what makes DIY so fun. It's just, you know, making the best that you can with what you got. And I think that's why sometimes I get so frustrated when people, you know, you say, oh, you're rich, you have all this analog equipment, and it's like, oh, it gets so nauseating, because it's like, all this stuff, I mean, like, this board itself, I bought for $500 even. That is very obtainable for the average person. Even if you're in high school, I mean, you could save up and buy a $500 board. That's completely reasonable. And, you know, the price you're going to pay is kind of the stuff I'm dealing with. You know, these Tascams, cheap prosumer gear, you know, it's probably not going to sound good, be as calibrated as good, easily calibrated. You can't even really calibrate this board as something like a Neve or, you know, name whatever brand. You know what I'm saying? But listen, that's just what I have to deal with. And once again, why I get frustrated when people call me rich or something. These people are ignorant. They have no idea what they're talking about. All my gear was very cheaply had. Which is the whole point of this channel. The whole point of this fucking channel is me just trying to show how someone like me who has, you know, no formal training or anything like that can do this stuff and make, I think, pretty decent music, you know. I was really proud of the end result of this record, and really, the reason I started recording was to make this album, you know. I didn't even know how to play guitar or bass when I came up with the idea of recording an album, so it's all very doable, and I think that's why you guys watch this channel, right? You kind of see someone who's just a normal person do this stuff. I don't know how long this video was. It could have been 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. Once again, it's like the past probably 15 minutes of me showing the difference between the left and right channel. I know it's probably pretty boring for a lot of people out there, which is why I didn't record me doing troubleshooting last night, but I think for like maybe the 1% of viewers that are watching these videos, I hope you find it interesting and maybe learn a thing or two. I gotta go. It's Valentine's Day. It's 3:30. I'm supposed to do something for my girlfriend, and I don't even have any chocolates yet, so I gotta get going. Peace, guys.